Tomorrow will be a grim milestone. The horror that started after the Hamas terror attack on Israel began a cycle of violence. Israeli jets have relentlessly bombarded Gaza. Hamas-controlled Gazan authorities say that over 41,800 people have died. In the last 12 months, Israel has used almost every weapon in its arsenal to destroy the Hamas. But the group still remains a fighting force. Gaza is now reduced to a heap of rubble. Our special report explores the question on the lips of every surviving Gazan. When will this carnage end?
The once bustling streets of the Gaza Strip have been transformed into an eerie landscape of dusty craters, twisted wires, and crumpled buildings. After a year of Israeli bombardment following Hamas's October 7th attacks, the densely populated enclave, with a pre-war population of 2.3 million, has been pulverized. Here, in the southern city of Khan Yunis, more than 19,000 buildings have been damaged, data from the UN satellite center UNOSAT shows. It is the second worst affected area. The first is northern Gaza. Jihad Shamli, who lost a child in March, has been displaced 4 times since Israel's offensive began.
In any city in Gaza, you find rubble in the streets. Every street we enter, we find rubble. Gaza is not a war. Gaza had an earthquake, worse than war. We have been through a grinder. Gaza has been through a grinder this year. The destruction we saw, we have never seen in all of history. The other thing, we get the rubble not to build houses, no, but for tombstones and graves, from one misery to another.
Hamas attacked Israeli communities on October 7th, killing around 1,200 people and taking around 250 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. Israel says Hamas hides fighters among the general population in Gaza. The militant group denies this. Israel says it will strike Hamas wherever they emerge, while trying to reduce harm to civilians. Palestinian health authorities say more than 41,700 people have been killed since the start of Israel's military campaign. UNOSAT shows 2/3 of Gaza's pre-war structures have been damaged as Israel tries to eliminate Hamas. That's a total of 163,778 structures. And the UN estimates that more than 42 million tons of debris are piled up in the Strip. That's over 14 times the rubble accumulated in all the conflicts in Gaza since 2008, and enough to fill the Great Pyramid of Giza 11 times.
2014, we have managed to, clear 3 million tons. And this is now 42 million, so you can imagine what it means, again, in terms of capacities. And if you want to visualize, I think this is also interesting for you, but to visualize 42 million, because I think this is what it is. But basically, you take Central Park, New York, you build on the perimeter a wall 8 meters high, and you fill it. That's 42 million tons.
The UN estimates that it would take 14 years and at least $1.2 billion to safely dispose of the rubble, if the war stopped now. But the scale of destruction is only one of the challenges. Conflict debris differs from normal controlled construction and demolition waste, as it contains unrecovered bodies, in this case as many as 10,000, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, and unexploded bombs. And the dust produced can be contaminated with heavy metals from munitions and household or industrial chemicals. All pose huge health and safety risks.
I can give you 100% assurance that people are being exposed to massive amounts of pollutants, metal contamination in water, in air, in food. They are inhaling it as we bomb them. And those kinds of exposures will end up causing all kinds of DNA damage in mother's reproductive cells, in father's reproductive cells, and that would culminate in a horrific rise in birth defect in children in Gaza.
The contents of busted sewage pipes underneath the debris can contaminate water supplies and provide an environment for disease-transmitting insects or a home for snakes and scorpions. The rubble is also a good environment for sandflies, which can spread skin infections. The United Nations Environment Program, or UNEP, estimates that 2.3 million tons of the debris generated in this conflict could be contaminated with asbestos. It is mainly found in the older buildings and structures of Gaza's 8 crowded refugee camps, some of which have been hit. With prolonged exposure, the asbestos fibers are inhaled and over time can cause diseases, including lung, larynx, and ovarian cancers, and fibrosis of the lungs, according to the World Health Organization. Experts say asbestos-related diseases usually take 10 to 50 years to emerge. The path ahead is also littered with practical difficulties. UN experts say Gaza lacks the 1,300 acres of land needed to store all the rubble, and landfills are now in an Israeli military zone. Israel's military unit Kogat says they were in a restricted area, but access would be granted. Government officials report fuel and machinery shortages as Israeli restrictions slow clear-up efforts. Israel did not specifically comment on these allegations. The UNEP says it will need owners' permission to remove rubble, but the scale of the destruction has blurred property boundaries, and some property records have been lost in the war. Asked about the debris, Kogat said it aims to improve waste handling and will work with the United Nations to expand efforts. Several donors have expressed interest in rebuilding Gaza. But a UN official who asked to remain anonymous told Reuters that, quote, everyone is concerned whether to invest if there is no political solution in place.
Let's talk about the one-year anniversary of the war in Gaza. Mohammed Najib is a journalist, war correspondent and security analyst. Is now joining us from Ramallah in West Bank. Mr. Najib, thank you very much for making time for us and welcome. I just want to know from you, it's now 1 year since the war in Gaza erupted. Are there lessons that have been learned and what challenges lie ahead?
Yes, actually, a year after the Israeli war on the Gaza Strip in October 23, the humanitarian situation in Gaza has become catastrophic. The population suffers from severe shortage of essential food, water, and medicine. And Israel has destroyed their income from fish and from agriculture, destroyed their fishing fleet. So they become more dependent on international aid. And because of the Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip, then it become very limited, and they striving in Gaza. It's a very difficult situation. Actually, more than 85% of the Gaza population, equal 1.9 million people, have been internally displaced to the ongoing bombing and the destruction of their homes. And more 60% of the homes and infrastructure has been destroyed. So this making the living condition in Gaza impossible.
Mr. Najib, even as the anniversary is marked, that has not stopped raining bombs on Gaza. The carnage continues and the protests are doubling each time. What message is the Palestinian Authority sending out to the world and Israel as the anniversary approaches?
Actually, the Palestinian Authority called for the stop of the war from the first days of the Israeli strikes of Gaza Strip, but Israel doesn't listen even to the closest ally, to Biden administration, to the American administration, not to stop the war, even to allow the entry of food supplies and medicines and humanitarian assistance to the Gaza people, to the fuel, to the hospitals, to continue providing medical services. So the Palestinians, after a year, think that Israel is planning to stay a longer time in Gaza, and it appointed a military commander for the Gaza Strip. So this means that the sufferance of the civilians of the Gaza people will continue and will last for a long time, as long as Israel plans to stay for a longer time in Gaza and militarily ruling Gaza Strip.
Mr. Najib, finally, there are now new war fronts. We are talking about Lebanon and we are talking about Iran. Will Israel manage to defend itself fighting on all borders? It's fighting in the north, it's fighting in the south, it's fighting literally everywhere. Your views?
Actually, the recommendation of the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, and the chiefs of security services told the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel has accomplished the target in Gaza. It destroyed Hamas and its military arsenal, and he can stop the war in Gaza. But many believe that the Israelis want to continue that for political reasons, not because defending Israel and from a threat from Gaza. I don't think there is a threat from Gaza against Israel at this time, after a year of destruction and killing of people, and thousands of Hamas have been killed and their arsenal of rockets destroyed. But the Palestinians think that Israel wants the continue of the war against Gaza for political reason, for the Prime Minister political agenda, not because there is a necessity to protect the security of Israel.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. I've been talking to Mohammed Najib. He's a journalist, war correspondent and security analyst. Mr. Najib, thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.